the Ask TCW live podcast. Lots of questions in this week, and we will answer those questions after this short musical intro. Yes, hello, and thank you to everybody that is joining us for this podcast. Like I say, lots of questions to get through. My name is Aaron Lord, and I'm delighted to say joining me to answer your questions are Andy Haywood.
Good evening.
Good evening. Antoine Marie-Jeanne.
Aloha.
Hello, and finally, it's Jono Bullard.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, gents. I hope you're all well. You've seen the questions. We've got a lot to get through this week, and you, the listener, you know by now what you need to do. If you are listening to us live, then get in touch with us via Twitter. You should know the handle by now, but if you don't, it is at Cat's Whiskers TV, and we're on board with the hashtags, and our hashtag is AskTCW, and we will read out anything that we get within reason, obviously, throughout this show. But let's get cracking with the questions. Questions this week, they range from, obviously, the Continental Cup, something about Guildford joining the Elite League potentially, and some bits in between. So we will start off with one from your wife, Jono.
Yep.
Helen has got in touch with us, and she says
she's
September...
not. She's not listening. She's watching Oldby City. So.
Oh, is she? Oh. Did she not like Midsummer Murders on ITV? But anyway, that's enough of TV. We'll get to the hockey. So Helen said, in September, you were all quite annoyed that Neil Black said Europe was the priority this season, as you saw it more of a distraction. How do you feel about it now? I don't think I was annoyed, to be honest, Helen. I backed Neil Black all the way with his European adventure, but let's see what the other three think. And we'll come to Jono. Seeing that it was Helen, your wife, that asked that, I'll let you take the floor first.
Every season, the league should be the priority. No question about that. That is the bread and butter. That's what we pay our season tickets to watch. Winning the league or challenging for the league should be the priority. However, we have actually set out and achieved the objective that the owner set. And his objective was Europe was a priority, and we want to win it, and we've gone and won it. And at the time, as of right now, we are the first UK team to ever win it. So that gives us a lot of kudos, I think, for being the first team to ever win the Continental Cup from the UK. I still think the league is the priority, and I think what happens now is how we see out the rest of the season. Can go one or two ways. It gives us a lift, and we challenge. Well, I still think we're too far behind, but we start to put a run together. Or there's a thought through the club that goes, right, job done. We don't have to bother too much now. I think and hope it will be the first one.
Okie dokie. And I'll come to you next. How do you feel about it now?
Well, I'm like you, Aaron. I wasn't annoyed at all, to be honest. He didn't actually say it was the priority. He said it was a priority, which is slightly different things. And I'm always fully behind Elite League teams moving off into Europe and playing in Europe. I'm a firm believer that for our league to progress, we need to be taking an active part in these tournaments and doing as well as we can. And I'm delighted that we've become the first British team to win the Continental Cup. It's fantastic. Like Jono said as well, I'm hoping now that we use it as a kickstart and just go on a decent run. Even if we're not going to win the league, momentum is everything when it comes to obviously the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup against our nearest and not so dearest. and the playoffs, which I want to win again. I want to retain. I want to win every trophy that we can available. I am greedy, but
there's nothing wrong in that. Andy, finally for you, sort of two different views there from obviously Jono and Anne. Which side do you go on, and how do you feel obviously about what Neil Black said at the start of the season and where we are now?
Well, I kind of edge towards Ant's side, I suppose. I'm kind of ambivalent with the whole. It's a distraction, and we'll be injured, all that kind of attitude. I just like, to me personally, I just like the idea of playing new teams, testing ourselves in arguably higher standard leagues, and seeing what we can do against these teams in Europe. But I thought realistically, you look at the year that we were in the CHL. It was a pretty average at best season, but the real sort of highlight was our CHL performances, and the games that we played, and obviously the win against Hamburg especially. They were real big highlights for that season, which arguably was pretty average at best. So I'm happy with the Continental Cup. I'm happy with the CHL. I quite enjoy, all that kind of thing. I used to really like the Ahern Cup because it meant you got to see new teams that you didn't normally see. And I think obviously in a league like ours, where you do see the same teams over and over again. Obviously we'll play Sheffield 8 times in the league. We'll be playing them twice in the Challenge Cup group stages. We've got them in the semi-finals, so we'll play them twice more. If we get them in the quarterfinals of the playoffs, that's another 2 more times. And as much as I enjoy playing Sheffield, it gets a bit much. So these sort of games are really special.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you for your question, Helen. You can tell her, Jono, when you finish this podcast.
Yeah.
We'll go to a next question, and sticking with the Continental Cup theme, and this one comes from Jerome Lucy, and we had it in the other night when Monday's podcast was on. So Jerome says, is this now classed as a successful season already? And is it right to prioritise Europe over the league? Well, obviously you've touched on the second part of that question, but I'll come in the same order. So Jono, starting with you. Is it classed as a successful season already for you?
Not at the moment for me. I think it's very good, and I think it's excellent that we won the Continental Cup for all the reasons that I said in the last answer. Successful, I think if we get another trophy, then possibly yes, because we'll have won Europe and we'll have won something domestically as well. So for me, I think if we win something else, then yes, I think we can class it as a successful season.
Okay, Ant, I'll let you take the floor now.
Anytime you win a trophy, it's a success, regardless of what. Well, I say what trophy. We won't talk about the conference. I mean, your main trophies. You win either the Challenge Cup, the league, the playoffs, or in our case, we're the first British team to win the Continental Cup. I think I've said that already. I'm going to carry on saying it. I'm going to carry on saying that for a long, long time. So I really don't care. Yes, it's a success. We've done something no other team has done, and what would happen? I might think differently if we just completely fall apart now, get knocked out of the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup, don't make the playoffs, and just fall away in the league. I might think differently at the end of the season. But as at this moment in time, I'm very happy. I'm a very happy Panthers fan. Yes, it's a success for me.
Okie dokie. Andy, finally a success for you, or not?
No, it's a success for me.
Okie dokie. I mean, it's quite interesting. So I'll come back to you, Jono, obviously with you being slightly different to the other two. Would it be quite strange for you then, in the sense of that this team now is history makers? Their names will go down in history and be talked about in years to come when talking about the first British team to win the Continental Cup, but it could also be classed in your eyes potentially as a unsuccessful season.
I didn't say unsuccessful. As I said,
Well,
it'd be a good season, but
not a success.
But not entirely successful, because you look at how he was playing October, November. We were terrible. Could you class that as part of a success?
Well, this is what I mean. I kind of get what you're saying, and I suppose, like Ant says, to a certain degree, there's still a long way to go, and we could completely bottom out and really fall out of contention in every other trophy, but yet they'll still be known as history makers.
Yeah, and rightly so, absolutely. And I don't want people to think I'm being negative. I'm not. I think it's absolutely. Oh, no. I think it's incredible what we've done in Europe, but at the same time, we probably haven't been at our best domestically for 2 months of the season. Yeah, we've been superb since probably the beginning of December, but I think to measure success, we've won this European competition, which is fantastic. I think to measure success now, we need to win something domestically as well.
Okie dokie. Well, what do you think, guys, of the Panthers Nation and anybody that's listening to this? If we just end up being Continental Cup champions and that is all, would you class it as a successful season, or do you agree with Jono that we need to win something domestically to kind of cement that successful season? Do get in touch with us and we will read it out later on in the show. So let's move on to another question, and this one comes from Anthony Russell. And Anthony says, this is a great victory for the Panthers as a club and a great victory for the Elite League. But given the high number of imports, can we claim this as a great victory for British hockey? Andy, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, I think so. Because ultimately, realistically, if it wasn't for the imports, then we wouldn't have won it. And that's not a disservice to our Brits, but I just think if you had a team full of Brits, I don't think at the moment they'd have that kind of quality. We talked on I can't remember if it was Sunday's or Monday's podcast about like the written team, for example. They've got a lot of dual nationals as well as imports, and obviously the dual nationals don't count over there, I believe.
Right.
In their league. So obviously, there are still a lot of what we would class as imports. So obviously, you think of players that have played for GB in the past, but are still classed as imports in the league. I still think that's a strange scenario, but by the same token, it kind of cuts out that whole thing, like I say, with the Italians. Where they can have all these dual nationals and they don't class as imports, so therefore they are all classed as Italian players. But majority of them would have played applied their trade and learnt it all in North America. So I still think it's a great success for British ice hockey. I think ultimately, if we ever get to a stage where there's 70, 80 top-class Brits, and the teams are down to 3 imports or whatever, and we play in the Continental Cup and win it with those kind of numbers, I can't see any other way that any team in the Elite League would have that kind of chance to do what we've done, because it's the imports ultimately that bring us that little bit of quality that enable us to compete in these tournaments.
I mean, and imports have been a major part of British hockey for many, many years. Obviously, the number has varied through the years, but they've still played a part in the club's histories and in British ice hockey. But so for you, can this be a great victory for British ice hockey?
Yeah, it can be. When we picked our players of the tournament out on Monday, Robert Farmer featured heavily. Robert Farmer scored those last 2 goals in that final, and albeit should have had a perfectly good goal disallowed against the Kazakhstan team. We couldn't have done it without the British players, that's for sure. Yes, the main emphasis is on the likes of Williams, McGrattan, etc. But the Brits played a big part, and it's putting the name out. It's putting the Elite League on the map, and that in itself, for me, is a success for British hockey.
And JB, just very quickly, obviously, in the previous question, I talked about that these players will go down in history as history makers, but evidently the first thing that people will mention is the Nottingham Panthers. It won't be said player, Matt Carter. They won't talk about maybe Brian McGrattan or Steve Lee or any of the players. It will be the Nottingham Panthers were the first team to win the Continental Cup from Britain. So surely that's a great victory for British ice hockey in itself. And imports, like I said, are just a part, aren't they? But it's the club as a whole.
Yeah, and I can't really add anything to what and Andy have said. It's a British hockey team based in Britain, putting the league on the map by being the first British team to win it. So yes, I think it is a success for British hockey.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much for your question, Anthony, and we'll move on to another question. This one comes from the Cage, and it comes from the Flying Shirt. And Ant, you mentioned Robert Farmer, and the Flying Shirt has asked a question in regards to him. So the Flying Shirt has said, has his contribution in the Continental Cup win on Sunday and the way he has continued to develop all of this season finally confirmed Robert Farmer as the best Brit in the league? So, Ant, seeing that you mentioned him, I'll let you start on this one.
The best Brit in the league would be a hard thing to say for sure, and there are plenty of Elite League fans out there that cannot stand Robert Farmer and do not understand what he brings to the table. One of the best, certainly the best. I wouldn't say so for sure.
Okie dokie. Jono, I'll come to you next. Best Brit in the league for you, Robert Farmer, at the moment?
It's very subjective because we see him week in, week out. We only see the other Brits of other teams when they come to players or we travel away and watch them. So it's a very subjective question. For me, I think Robert Farmer is currently head and shoulders the best Brit in the team by a mile. He's played absolutely. To be fair, he's played superb for 3 seasons, and all these people from other teams and who haven't mentioned, who say they dislike him and everything, they would have him on their team in a heartbeat. You mark my words. But there's fans of other teams. I'm sure Sheffield fans wouldn't say Robert Farmer's the best Brit. They'd probably go for someone like Robert Dowd or Ben O'Connor. Same at Coventry, they'd probably go Ashley Tate, Russ Cowley, someone like that. So it's very subjective depending on who you support. But he's certainly the best Brit at the Nottingham Panthers at the moment.
Okay. Finally, Andy, are you more confident on Robert Farmer being the best Brit in the league, or do you think it's quite subjective, like Jono says?
I think I think as an all-round package, he possibly offers the most. But for me, I still think you have to go a long way to look past Ben O'Connor. For me, he is the standard that as Brits go. I think he's the closest British player that we've got that is of a seriously decent import standard.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much for your question. The Flying Shirt. It's I think there's no question that Robert Farmer has, for many seasons, like Jono says, improved and developed, and is currently leading the way for the Panthers in Brit form. So we will move to another question, and this one comes from Henry Appleby, and qualify for the Continental Cup, should we be allowed to defend it?
Aaron, sorry, you just went out again. Can you repeat the question?
Okay, my apologies. I hope you can hear me now. This one comes from Henry, and Henry says, if for some reason we aren't given a spot in the CHL and we don't qualify for the Continental Cup, should we be allowed to defend it? A little bit like Liverpool in the Champions League a few years ago. Now, I've seen lots of talk on social media in regards to, obviously, the CHL said at the start of the season about the Continental Cup winners obviously being invited into the CHL for the following season, and they would take part in that. And then there's been a little bit of a backtrack saying that they'll have to be approved by the CHL board, etc. A lot of people have talked about that was just a precaution, just in case certain teams might have won the Continental Cup, etc., etc. So let's just say that we aren't given the spot in the CHL and we don't qualify for the Continental Cup. Do you think that we should be able to defend it as current champions? Jono, I'll come to you first.
No, because other teams who've won it have not managed to qualify for the season after, so they haven't been able to defend it, so no. However, I think we will get that Champions League spot. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. If the CHL have said that the Continental Cup winners get a Champions League spot, and okay, I realise they probably put a little caveat in there because of the team from Kazakhstan, and also written not having a huge rink, same with Odense. But we've been in the Champions League before, we've got a state-of-the-art arena, why wouldn't they let us into the Champions Hockey League? So I think we'll be in it anyway. But if we're not, and if we don't qualify for the Continental Cup by right, then no, we shouldn't be allowed to defend it because there's no precedent for that happening before.
Okie dokie. Andy, do you share the same view of that?
Yeah, but basically I would go slightly further and say that we wouldn't deserve to be because we weren't good enough. If you're good enough to qualify for the Continental Cup, then you can play in it. And in my opinion, if you aren't good enough to qualify, then realistically, then no, you shouldn't be able to defend it.
Okay, and any different views on that, or is it a full house?
Full house.
Okie dokie, we'll move on then. Thank you very much for your question, Henry, and fingers crossed, like Jono says, we will get the CHL spot, and they were just being a little bit precautionary with their statement there. Finally, we'll finish the Continental Cup questions with quite a simple one, really, and this one comes from Pat Wright. And they just say, why can't some people just let us enjoy winning the Continental Cup? And I'll open it up just to a general sort of conversation here. I won't go to anyone in particular because I'll just kind of ask, do you feel that there have been people out there that are kind of, sort of pouring water over our celebrations and not kind of letting us enjoy the moment and enjoy breaking history and making history? Do you feel like that, any one of you, or do you think people have kind of just left us to it?
I think sorry, go on.
Sorry, I know I should have gone to somebody, but I just wanted to open it up. So, Andy, you got in there first, so go on, you lead the way.
Well, I was going to say, I think there are some people that genuinely do not care either way. They're just not interested. And ultimately, that's certainly no problem to me. If they're not interested, they're not interested, and you can't force someone to be interested in our success or in our glory. But I do also think that there are some people there that are, in my opinion, that are coming across as being a bit jealous. And again, I don't really think that's that much of an issue, because it's no different to, for me personally, it's no different to when, I might say something derogatory about Sheffield because of the fact that they win everything every year. but that's the reason why I dislike them, because they constantly win, and it's annoying because we want to do it. But obviously, I do think there's a touch of jealousy there, but I don't think it's as widespread as perhaps it appears to be from some of the comments, because I do think that there are genuine cases of people just genuinely not caring.
Okie. Jono, what was you going to say? You obviously had something to say on the matter.
Pretty similar to Andy. I think that there's a lot of jealousy out there. There are people who do genuinely not care. However, what does make me laugh is the people who claim they don't care and then can't wait to go on social media to tell everybody how much they don't care. That's always a killer for me. And then you do get the bitter ones, and that to be fair, that makes it a much sweeter for me when people are bitter and twisted about it. But it's like Andy said, if Sheffield had won it, if Belfast had won it, if Coventry had won it and done it, there'd be Panthers fans out there doing exactly the same thing. So it's the nature of sport. That's just the way it is.
Very true. And I'll finally come to you. You're obviously still celebrating the Continental Cup win, and will do for many days and weeks and months, and rightly so. So I will just give you the final happy word and just tell everybody, and just just if they don't know, they've been on holiday, say they've been away, they've been to Barbados for a couple of weeks. Just remind them what happened at the weekend.
What you mean when we were the first British to win the Continental Cup? I mean, to answer the question, the original question is, like it or not, there are people out there that just don't like our team for whatever reason, whether it's the never forget Nottingham Forest 1979 European Cup giants, or whether they're from the orange lot up the road or the blue lot down the road, whatever. Whatever we do, they won't like, and that fair enough. If Liverpool Football Club win something, I'm not going to like it. It's no different to that. But I both have mentioned so far as well, that there is a lot of jealousy out there as well, and we'd be exactly the same if, like Belfast or Coventry, Sheffield, Cardiff, etc., if they were the first ones to win this European trophy like we actually were, I'd be jealous. I'd congratulate them for it. It'd be brilliant for British hockey, but I'd be jealous.
Okie dokie. Well, Pat, you keep on enjoying winning the Continental Cup. Don't let anybody stop you celebrating whenever you want, because nobody will stop our Ant from celebrating. So let's move on, and let's move back to the Elite League. And John Casey has a question for us. And John says, does the winner of the Gardner Conference deserve to be the second seed for the playoffs? Braehead are currently 6th in the standings. It's a tough one, really, this, isn't it? Because obviously, the winners of that Gardner Conference do get a second seed, which you would say stands them in better stead for qualifying for the playoff weekend. But I personally can't see that changing anytime soon. But, Jono, do you think they deserve to be second seed?
Them's the rules.
Well, there you go.
They are the rules. They are the rules that that has been agreed by the league and is set out at the start of every season. Now, you can argue it till you're blue in the face about the perceived strength of each conference, but the rules are that the winners of the Erdart and the winners of the Gardner will be seeded behind the league champions, whoever that should be. So, it's whether it's fair or not doesn't come into it. That's the rules that we play to, and actually, it's probably a bit of a disadvantage for Braehead, because currently they're 6th. If they move up to second seed, they'll play the team in 7th, which at the moment is Manchester, who beat them 6-3 on Saturday. So, actually being elevated to that higher seed probably doesn't do them any favours.
And I would also say that could be true for anybody in that Gardner Conference, because let's be honest, that Gardner Conference isn't totally wrapped up. There's no saying that it will be Braehead that are in there, and obviously you've got Manchester Dundee is still, I heard an interview with their coach, Mark Lefebvre, and he says that they're still going for that conference title, and they're currently, in ninth. So
yeah, I mean, if you look at the table, the Gardner Conference table, Bray at the top with 28 points from 20, Fife for second with 22 from 20. So Brayhead have got quite a gap. I mean, Manchester Storm are further 8 points behind that. Dundee are 11 points behind Brayhead. So it's going to take a pretty good run to take that conference title away from the Clan, to be honest.
Well, I suppose there's still a lot of conference games to play, as we know from who we've got to play, especially when we're looking to see whether we can chase down, Steelers, Giants, and the Devils at the top of the league. But and I'll come to you. I mean, do you think it's fair the seeding for the playoffs and the Gardner Conference winners get second seed?
Well, they'd only get the second seed if they don't win the league. I mean, when the conference system came in, everybody assumed Brayhead were going to win the league, me included. But like Jono said, they're the rules. So while those rules are in place, yes, it is fair. They are playing to that competition standard.
Okie dokie. Andy, anything to add on that, or shall we move on to the main topic of what social media has been talking about this week following the Elite League board meeting?
Yeah, let's go on. Let's move on.
Okay, so if you don't know, there was a Elite League board meeting yesterday, I believe, and there was a interview with Storm's general manager Neil Russell, conducted by Elite League media officer Rob McGregor. And within that interview, Neil Russell let us know that the Guildford Flames had applied to be members of the Elite League for the next season. So we've obviously, sort of social media has gone crazy with this. Lots of people with lots of views and opinions, and we've had some questions in on this, so we'll move on to that now. And we'll go to the first one. This one comes from Ian Pigeon, and Ian says, with Guildford applying to join the Elite League, how's the best way to approach the conference system? 2 times 6 or 3 times 4, or you could obviously turn that around and say 4 times 3. So, Andy, I'll come to you first, seeing that you didn't answer the last question. I know we've talked about this on, obviously, our WhatsApp group, and I spoke to a few people on Twitter late last night about it. Lots of opinions, but what's your view on how to approach the conference system if Guildford get the thumbs up from the Elite League?
Well, for me personally, I'd like to see 3 conferences of 4. I had a look into it earlier on when I saw it, and obviously we spoke a bit about it. I just think it gives teams a bit of keeps that sort of local sort of feel to it, so that obviously the teams that rely on the rivalry games to get the crowds in, they still get them, so they're not obviously going to be missing out. I still think that you play teams enough that it doesn't skew any of the standings. And I, to be brutally honest as well, I mean, I looked at it and we spoke a bit about it, and obviously people will say things like, I put it on Twitter and someone said, but if you go with the groups of, Conference A being the 4 Scotland teams, Conference B being Belfast, Manchester, Sheffield and Nottingham, and Conference C being Cardiff, Coventry and the 2 new teams, where they would say that if you're going down that route, then surely Cardiff become a new Brayhead. Well, they might do, but all that means is that they're just going to be favourites, in my eyes. It doesn't mean they're going to win it. It doesn't mean that they're going to have an easier time of it. They've still got to win enough games to be crowned champions, and regardless of that, in order to do that, they have to be the best team. And for me, I have no problem with the conference system. I know a lot of people would like to see it scrapped, which is obviously another option. They could get rid of it altogether and just go back to playing each other, a couple of times at home, a couple of times away, and be done with it. Ultimately, I think there's going to be a lot of talk. I think a lot of it's going to be down to logistics and business as much as, the actual gameplay, because they need to make sure that these teams that are coming in and the teams that are already here are financially stable. We don't want to go down a route where, we're accepting loads of new teams in, but none of them can sustain being in the league, and may drop out just as quick as they arrive.
And obviously, Andy's there gone through his 3x4 and has mentioned what his conference would be. How would you approach the conference system if Guildford do join the Elite League?
I'd probably go 2 of 6 and have Belfast move into the Northern Conference. You're still then you're going to get the same whinges then. It's a bit, Belfast are now going to win the league, and then from the other lot you'll be like, Panthers and Sheffield, they get to go and play the new teams more often. I think if we have to keep the conference system, it'd be pretty more straightforward for me to just go 2 of 6.
Okie dokie. Well, Jono Ant makes a good point there about if we were to keep the conference system. I suppose there's no saying that the conference system will still be in place even if there is 12 teams. It could go back to a full league and you just play everybody the same amount of times home and away, etc. Or do you think this, if Guildford do join, obviously Milton Keynes Lightning coming up, it does give us the opportunity and gives the league the opportunity to grow the conference system, whether that be via the 2x6 or getting that extra conference and having 3 conference systems.
I think they bought in, or another team. They want another team in to keep it at even numbers, so they can keep the conference system. Because you wouldn't have been able to do it with 11 teams, you can do it with 12. And I think I agree entirely with that. 2x6, because I think if you move Belfast to the Northern Conference and you have 2 new teams in the Southern Conference, I think they're actually going to be pretty balanced. They're going to be pretty balanced conferences, I think.
Do you not see do you not see one team benefiting from that 2 times 6?
There could probably be an argument that it benefits Belfast, but in that conference you've got Braehead, who historically have always been pretty strong. I mean, this season they haven't been, but the past couple of seasons they have been. You've got an improving Manchester, an improving Fife, and then there's Dundee and Edinburgh, are historically towards the bottom of the league. In the other conference, you've got Cardiff, Nottingham, Sheffield, who historically are pretty strong sides. Coventry, who again are another team who are finishing towards the bottom of the league the past few seasons, and then the 2 new teams. So I think 2x6 actually is pretty balanced.
I mean, Andy said this at the start, really, of this question. A lot of this will depend on logistics. I imagine the teams will all have different views on the conference system and who would be in what conference, etc. Because they obviously have to look after their business, don't they, at the end of the day? But do you think that if it was to be the 2x6 and Belfast were to join that sort of that Northern Conference, that they'd be happy with that, in the sense of they wouldn't be getting the Sheffields, the Nottingham Panthers, the Devils over to the SSE Arena on a regular basis, so it potentially harms their income? And then finally, do you think that maybe Braehead need that other, no disrespect to the people in the Gardner Conference at the moment, but they need that big team to face on a more regular basis to just help propel them to that next level?
Well, if you're having 2 extra teams, then you're going to be playing everybody less anyway, because you've got to fit in fixtures for 2 extra teams who you're going to be playing. So the way I see it is you play your own conference 3 times home, 3 times away, and then the other conference twice at home, twice away, which isn't a massive difference. It's certainly not as a bigger gulf as it is now with your own conference 4 home and away, and then the other one 2 home and away. I mean, if you do it that way, it increases it to 54 games, which is 2 extra games you've got to find. So I don't think it makes too much of a difference, if I'm honest.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much for your question, Pidge. Talking about implications, etc. Another question, and this one comes from Matthew Kane. And Matthew asks, what implications does a 12-team league have for the playoff format? Andy, I'll come to you first again on this one.
Well, again, it could go. It could go anyway, in the sense that they could keep it exactly the same as it is. It's just 2 more teams in a conference. That you could argue makes it slightly more difficult to get into the top 2. Or you could look at going back to the round robin stages, which personally I would like to see. But that's dependent on how many more games are going to be played in the league, because obviously you're going to get a lot of extra games with the round robin system before you get to the finals week. But I just think, that realistically, I don't think much will change with regarding the playoffs, because I just think that as it is, I think that they will probably stay very similar. I would like to see the round robin return. Whether it does or not, again, I think will be down to logistics as much as anything else.
I mean, and obviously, apart from the winners of the 2 current conferences, get seeded, 1 and 2, and obviously, if the league champions are different to the conference champions, then they'll be seeded 1, and then you go 2, 3. Everybody knows the current playoff format. They don't need me to explain it to them. So could it be like Andy says, there might not be much change, and it'll just be, the top 8 in the league standings qualify for the playoffs, and it's just a case of 4 teams missing out instead of the current 2? Or do you think this potentially gives them the option of making the qualification for the playoff weekend down to your actual conference? So, the top 4 instead of the top 6, if it was to be 2 times 6, or do you think it will just stay with the league format as it is at the moment?
I've got for me, it's just going to stay exactly the same as it is now. Unfortunately, I mean, we could probably devote an entire podcast to what we could do with a 12-team league with regards to the Challenge Cup and with regards the playoffs. I mean, for instance, just quickly on the Challenge Cup, I'd probably go straight knockout for your first round, and then the winners of each game goes into a group, and then the top 2 play the final. Done. And then you could do something similar for the playoffs as well. But it's the Elite League. To me, it's not going to change. You're going to have your top 8. Your top 8 plus your conference winners, and nothing else is going to happen from that. You just got 14 missing out rather than 2. Sorry.
Nice.
Sorry.
My apologies for cutting over you there. And Jono, I mean, our league is where the focus is on the league basically, and not on playoff, etc. Do you think if it does go to the 2 times 6 and we have a 12-team league, 2 times 6 conference system, that it could finally mean that we maybe step away from the league being the main trophy, and your playoffs is that little bit more important, and hence maybe qualifying for the playoffs does come from the conference systems? Or do you kind of agree that we're stuck in stone with the league format?
The league will always be the most important competition, because that's the psyche of British sport, is that the league is the most important. However, with bigger conferences, you can then change the format of how you qualify for the playoffs. So what I would do, or my preferred option, would be the top 3 from each conference qualify for the playoff quarterfinals, because I don't think that will change at all, because of previous problems with getting ice time and that sort of thing. So I don't think that will change. I think it'll still be quarterfinals and then the final four weekend. But you have the top three from each conference and then 2 wild cards like they do in North America in the NHL, for example. So you top 3 from each conference and then the next 2 in the league who are not the top 3 in the conference, and there's your 8.
Wow. That would certainly be a big change to the way that sort of the Elite League is run, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think that's the fairest way of doing it. If you're going to have 2 conferences, then, don't pay lip service to them. Use them properly, like other leagues do. I mean, in the NHL, the teams with the most points don't necessarily qualify for the playoffs because of the division that they're in. So this would be similar. However, you've sort of got a bit of a safety net with those 2 wildcard choices.
I do agree with you in the sense of if we're going to go to a 2x6 team conference system, I do think there should be that extra kind of effort and put into the conference being worthwhile. I don't think it should just be kind of what I think it is at the moment. It's not. If you win the conference system, I don't think many teams celebrate it like it's a proper trophy. But if it was to go 2x6, I think it then allows us to maybe put more emphasis on that conference and winning that conference, or potentially, as you say, Jono, finishing in the top 3. It gives it a bit more clout. But yeah. I suppose we'll wait and see because, let's be honest, we've still got to wait to see whether Guildford get the thumbs up from the Elite League and then what they're going to do with the conference system. It's certainly going to be a lot of conversations, I imagine, around the board tables. And like Andy said, there's obviously going to be a lot of logistics to discuss, etc. But just finally, just to kind of wrap up this section on the Guildford Flames and all the questions. And your dear wife has asked us to discuss the Guildford Flames. But just very quickly from all 3 of you, is it a good sign that the Guildford have applied to join the Elite League in your eyes?
Yeah, because they're arguably the strongest team in the EPL financially and crowd-wise. So yeah, absolutely.
And any do you disagree with that, or do you think it's a good move?
It's a brilliant move, and I really hope they're accepted, and looking forward to visiting Guildford next season.
Andy, just to finish on that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great, and to be brutally honest, so long as any team's financially sound, I'd welcome as many of them as possible. I do. One of the things that does sort of come into question with Guildford is with Milton Keynes and Guildford entering the Elite League, and obviously Manchester Phoenix in the situation they're in, it does leave quite a precarious position for the EPIHL, or is that it?
EPL, yeah, EPL.
It leaves them in a slightly precarious position. So it'll be interesting to see if some other teams decide, you know what, if they're going, we're going to have to go because we don't think we can sustain staying here, or there's a lot of things that could happen. But I think it will be an interesting few years if Guildford get accepted this season.
Okie dokie. Well, obviously we will keep an eye on that application, and as soon as the Elite League announce their kind of decision, we will retweet everything from our Cats Whiskers TV Twitter account, and we will talk about it on the podcast following that decision. So another thing to come out of the interview with Neil, the coach, Russell and Rob McGregor was the talk of goal line technology. And Adam Reddish asks, if goal line technology is introduced in 17-18, does this mean goal judges will be surplus to requirements? What role would they play? Ant, I'll come to you on this one.
If the technology's there, then yeah, you don't need them. I mean, they didn't have them in the Continental Cup, did they? They had the goal line technology instead. Do the goal judges actually get paid, or are they just volunteers?
Volunteers.
I think they're volunteers. Yes.
So they don't get anything at all. They don't get a compensation. Because then you could use the money. I was thinking if they got paid, you could use the money for that to pay for a fourth official or towards a fourth official. But no, I don't think they'll be needed next season.
And Andy or Jono, do you disagree with that? Do you think they will be needed, either of you?
I think. Sorry, go on, Andy.
I think they will. I think they'll be needed for your general goal decisions. I think realistically, the use of goal line technology will be for your contentious decisions. I still think that we would have goal judges, and ultimately, if they are volunteers, then I don't see what harm it is in having them.
Yeah,
okay. Jono,
I pretty much agree. I pretty much agree with that. I suppose it depends on the technology that they're putting in. If it is all singing out, all dancing stuff, then maybe you don't need you don't have the need for a goal judge, because it could be something that just links up to a light that comes on. I think that's how it works in the NHL, but it depends on how good the technology is.
Okie dokie. Adam, I hope they have answered your question for you. Very interesting that you bring up the 3-man, 4-man system, and because I have to say that is one thing I found disappointing from that interview, was that they're not really going to be looking to bring the 4-man system back to the Elite League anytime soon, which I have to say I think is disappointing. But we will move on to some more questions as we look to wrap up this podcast. And this one, it's quite a long one, so bear with me. This one comes from Lee Constable. And he says, with Neil Black owning both us and the Clan, do you think he had some kind of master plan? Hey, there you go, that rhymes. Where he wanted the Panthers to concentrate and do well mainly in cup competitions and Europe this season, and have Clan as his main league team trying to push for that. I mean, even though the teams can beat anyone, it definitely is an easier conference for Braehead, and barring this season that they have struggled in, they have been fairly close over the past 2 seasons previous. Also, if this was the case, do you think there may be some implications for Braehead next season? As the Panthers have delivered these past 2 seasons, winning the Challenge Cup playoffs and now his main goal winning in Europe, and we still have a shout for the Challenge Cup and playoffs. However, with Braehead having a poor season up to now, they potentially have the playoffs they could win, but I'd be surprised if they made the Final 4. Do you think he will go all out for the Panthers to win the league just because Braehead have been close but have failed to deliver recently? Like I say, quite a long one there. John, I'll come to you first. I mean, do you think, there's obviously a lot of questions within that kind of one big, long question from Lee. So I'll kind of just ask a general one, and you can go off with what Lee said there. But do you think there will be any sort of implications with how Braehead have been performing so far this season, and the fact that Panthers have now won that challenge Continental Cup, and we still have trophies to go for the remainder of this season?
There's only one man who knows that, and that's Neil Black. I wouldn't have thought so, to be honest. And I disagree with the opening of the question. I don't think that Neil Black would say, right, Panthers, you concentrate on Europe and the Cup, and Braehead, you go for the league. I think he will have given both teams a budget, and then I think he'll be pretty hands-off once he's given them, right, here's your playing budget, off you go. I don't think Neil Black gets too involved.
Do you not think he says sort of like, do you not think he sets...
I would think he probably sets a target, but I don't think he would have gone, right, this team win the league, this team win in Europe. I think he would have said to the Panthers, as he said in that post-interview, one of the priorities is to win in Europe. Who knows what he said to the Braehead Clan. I also disagree about that easier conference thing. I have always disagreed with that. I just think that's a red herring, because if it was so easy, Braehead would have won the league every season, and they haven't. So Yeah, I don't know. I mean, only Neil Black knows that if it will have consequences for Braehead. I wouldn't have thought so, looking at the crowds they're pulling in.
Okie dokie. Andy, I'll come to you next. I mean, I kind of disagree in some ways with what Jono said there regarding, Neil Black potentially setting targets. I think Europe was a target for Panthers this year, and I would argue that the Clan now at the stage that they are and the crowds that they get and where they've been for the past few seasons, that a target for them would be to challenge for the league. But what's your kind of view on the whole question there from Lee, and do you think there will be implications?
Yeah, I think there will probably be implications if Braehead fall flat again, and that's not necessarily in the league. I just mean in terms of silverware. A lot of people make a lot out of the whole the fact that we've only won the league once, and obviously a lot of our own fans have been very vocal in not wanting Corey in charge of us because of our league form, whereas we're still winning trophies, and other teams would love to be in that position that we're in, where you could say, you know what, we're disappointed that we only won the Challenge Cup and the playoffs this season. So I think there will be targets. I think that they will have I think they will be told, roughly what is expected, but I think realistically they will all know roughly what is expected, because they're a professional hockey team full of professional hockey players. They will both be given the same budget, and if it works for one team, then you could argue that it should have worked for the other. There will always be implications, and I think realistically the implications are changes within that team, whether that comes from management side of things, whether it comes from the coaching, whether it comes from players and captains and things like that. I think if Braehead go trophyless this season, I think there will be changes there. Whether that's Finity himself, or whether that's a complete clear out of players and sort of a start from scratch mentality. But I do think that if they are trophyless, then we will see a different Braehead Clan next year.
Okay. And coming to you, I'm just going to pick up on one of the mini questions within Lee's long question, and the bit where he says, "Do you think go all out for Panthers to win the league?"
Sorry, Aaron, you broke up. I didn't catch what you said.
Title race. Did you not? Can you hear me now? And can you hear me now?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm just going to pick on one of the mini questions, and it's do you think he will go all out for the Panthers to win the league? I mean, what can sort of Neil Black do now for the Panthers to help them potentially get back in within touching distance of the league? Obviously, the deadline for signing players is still yet to come. But can he do anything? Can you see him doing anything to go all out for the Panthers? I mean, he's brought Jason Williams in. That we've seen how big impact he's had. But surely there's nothing more that Neil Black can do for the Panthers, is there?
I'd like to see us bring one, maybe two more players in as a kind of in that Beauregard mould of injury cover. Certainly, if Schultz is broken again, we've still no idea when Jeff Waugh's coming back. Maybe an extra D-man, an extra forward to help us with the running. But then it could go completely wrong, and you could be in a hardy situation like we were, where he just added nothing and it broke everything. So that's probably the only thing for me. But just to touch on the rest of it, I think Finity has to win the playoffs to save his job.
Right. Okay. You don't think the Gardner Conference will be enough?
I would have thought they're minimum expectation every year is to win that conference and mount a league challenge. They're not mounting a league challenge, so I think he has to deliver a trophy, an actual trophy, not a plastic conference one.
Just coming back to you, Jono, very quickly following on what Ant says there. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I was taking what I said about no changes at Brea in the fact with their budget, because I think the budget will remain the same, which is why I made the comment about the crowds that they're bringing in. Yeah, I think there will possibly be changes of certainly the playing personnel, possibly the coaching if they don't deliver a trophy this season. But I think from a budgetary point of view, I think that they will still have the budget to produce a squad that challenges.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much for your question, Lee. We'll move on to the final two questions for this week's podcast. And we had a question in from Max Artis earlier on this evening. And he quite simply says, have you got your silver trays? Now, for anybody that's going, silver trays, what the hell are they on about? Somebody tweeted the Nottingham Panthers asking if they were allowed to bring in silver trays, basically replicas, homemade replicas of the Continental Cup trophy for our game on Sunday against the Fireflies, as the Nottingham Panthers will be celebrating the Continental Cup win with the trophy, etc., on the ice after the game. So there are a lot of Panthers fans out there currently wrapping oval cardboard in tin foil, etc., and are going to take it to the game on Sunday. And Max would like to know, guys, are you busy after this podcast preparing your silver tray for Sunday? And I'll come to you first.
Yes, I am. I think it's a bit of fun. It's a different way of celebrating a success. I mean, the trophy that we won for the Continental Cup has got some stick already from opposition fans, so let's play along with it. Why not? It's no different to going to an FA Cup match and taking a cardboard cutout of the FA Cup and covering that in tinfoil. It's a bit of fun. I'm all for it.
Okay. Andy, I'll come to you next.
No.
Would you like to expand on why it's a no, or would you just like to leave it purely as a no?
Why? Because I just think, I mean, you've got to get it to the game for a start. I mean, how ridiculous are you going to look walking around town or walking from the car parks or the buses carrying a silver platter with you? And each to their own. But I just think, it's a monumental occasion. It's a fantastic achievement, and it sort of downplays it a little bit. But it's not gonna offend me in any great shape. And it's if people want to do it, that's fine with me. But I certainly won't be doing it.
Jono, you get the casting vote. We've got one taking a silver tray, one not taking a silver tray.
Not for me.
Not for you.
No,
okay.
Not my cup of tea, unfortunately. If people want to do it, that's fine. I won't be.
And it looks like you're on your own, mate.
I will say, though, myself and Mr. Wayne Roberts already decided on Sunday after the game that with us being in Belfast on Friday, we were going to resource one of those, the pre-made tinfoil ones to take into the SSE with us and wave that around. So we're just going to have a laugh with it. It's a bit of fun. So
well, talking about that, and obviously you are going over to the SSE Arena on Friday for the game against Belfast. I've actually just seen a tweet from A View from the Bridge, and they've said that Belfast will be banning all silver trays from now on. So I'm afraid that's not actually going to be allowed, Ant. So
there's ways of smuggling things in.
I'm only joking anyway. I'm sure the guys from A View from the Bridge would love us to take our silver trays into the SSE Arena just to celebrate us being. Final question of this week's Ask TCW podcast, and as a lot of you might know, our very own Jono Bullard did an interview with Brock Wilson about the Elite League and what Brock's views are in regards to what needs to change and what he would do if given the opportunity. And Chris Maltby has asked us a question in regards to this. And he says, whilst I'd love to see Brock Wilson have some involvement in the league, he's not going to do it for nothing. And I can't see the clubs funding it either. Jono, I'll come to you first, obviously, with you conducting the interview and speaking to Brock about his passion for the Elite League and what he would like to do and what he thinks need to change in it. A lot of people have talked about change. Sorry, but then people aren't going to do that for free, and that figurehead isn't going to be a voluntary role. It does need to be paid for. So, I mean, where would that potentially come from?
Well, it's like we said, if he's offered anything, which, let's face it, you've got to be honest, he's unlikely. He's got to move from Canada and where he's currently living and set up home and everything. So no, he's not going to be voluntary. You can't. Well, from speaking to him, the passion for the league just oozes out of him. He loves it. He's got some good ideas that have certainly been said before by fans, and it's about putting them into practice. Now the thing is, you've got all the owners, and here's Brock coming in and saying, right, I would like to do this, that, and the other, and basically pushing them in the background. Unfortunately, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So, from that point of view, I think it's unlikely. But if the league have got anything about them, they should probably be contacting him and having a chat with him and just saying, look, what is it? What are your ideas? And even if they can't get him over, they can certainly speak to him. From another point of view, what it has been good is it's got people talking about it, and fans have become very much engaged with what Brock said, and that shows that the fans have got an appetite for change and an appetite for things to change for the better and for things to improve, and that can only be good. If fans are talking about it and wanting change, then maybe that's where the pressure can come from for some change to happen. I personally think that the league does need somebody independent in there to oversee initiatives, and why not Brock Wilson?
Okay. Andy, I'll come to you. The commercial director role that was advertised earlier on in the year, last year now, obviously hasn't yet been filled. There's talk of that being sort of advertised, etc. But that still needs to be funded from somewhere. If Brock were to be offered some sort of role, where do you see that kind of money coming from? Because Chris says that he can't see the clubs funding it, but the clubs run the league, so they're going to have to fund it, aren't they, somehow?
Well, ultimately, yeah, they will fund it one way or the other if it happens. They will either fund it through funding it sort of as it is, so they would pay him a wage, or they would fund it through the fact that he would be paid out of Elite League coffers, which comes from them. So yeah, in a way, they would do, but realistically, as much as a lot of people want it to happen, like Jono said, I can't see it getting to that stage, because obviously it's going to put a lot of noses out of joint, and the noses that it's got to put out of joint are the ones who get the casting vote, and let's be honest, they're not going to say yes, are they?
Okay, and just kind of finally end this question and the kind of interview that Brock did with the Nottingham Post and with Jono, and like Jono says, it's brought a lot of people talking about it. Now, some of that's been positive, some of it has been a little bit sort of on the negative side, and like Brock said himself, you might not agree with it, you might agree with it, but he felt that it needs to be said, and like Jono says, you can't fault his passion for it. And the league is kind of getting to that stage now where people are leaning towards change, and it needs to improve, etc. So whether anything does come of this, surely it has been good for Brock to bring this to the forefront of the Elite League's kind of fan base, and to give his views on what needs to change.
Definitely. I'm surprised how much the fan base across the league is actually warm to, even if not everything that Brock was saying, but certainly part of it. And I think for me, if the Elite League can't afford to bring him across over or somebody in that position, then why can't they use him as a consultant? You can do that over Skype. You can do that over the phone. There's a definite need for change, I think, for the Elite League to progress, and it's brilliant that Brock's interviews have got everybody across the league talking about it.
Okay, well, if you would like to hear that interview that Jono did with Brock, then just head to our website. It's www.thecatswhiskersonline.co.uk, and you will find it there. Like we say, you cannot fault Brock's passion for the Elite League. But that does bring us to a close for this week's podcast. I'd like to thank everybody for getting in touch with us. Very much appreciated, and lots were discussed this week. But so I will say thank you very much to Ant.
No problem. Take care.
Thank you very much to Andy.
Anytime.
And finally, thank you very much to Jono.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
The AskTCW podcast will return next week.
No, it won't.
Oh no, it won't, because we're playing. Sorry, my apologies. We are playing the Sheffield Steelers in the first leg of the Challenge Cup quarter final. So semi-final. My apologies. Yes, sorry, I don't really care, because we're history makers and we're European champions. So that's my excuse for getting that segment wrong. But we'll end on a positive, and we will say thank you very much for joining us, and the AskTCW podcast will return in 2 weeks' time. But until then, ta-da!